down. Al-Baji Qa'id Sebsi will succeed Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It follows renewed violence in the capital Tunis prior to his departure. Opposition parties in Yemen say they plan to join an anti-government protest in a bid to pressure the president to step down. This comes after President Ali Abdullah Saleh met his army generals as he tries to shore up his grip on power. Well, after nearly 42 years in power, Libya's leader Muammar al-Gaddafi is being backed into a corner from which he may find it impossible to escape. AlJazeera lies just 50 kilometers west of Gaddafi's stronghold in Tripoli. Its center is now controlled by anti-government protesters, but they're surrounded by troops loyal to Gaddafi. 3 more areas in the east are also reported to be under the control of protesters. And as the standoff in AlJazeera continues, defections keep coming in. An Air Force general at one of Libya's main bases says his men have joined the People's Revolution. Aircraft at the Al Banin military airport are grounded. Well, that could weaken Muammar Gaddafi's regime even further. We'll look at international reaction to the crisis in a moment. But first, this report from Jackie Rowland.
The town of AlJazeera lies just 50 kilometers to the west of Tripoli. Now it has become a new front line in the battle between pro- and anti-Gaddafi forces. These pictures were shot by journalists brought here by the regime. The idea was to show the outside world that Gaddafi is still in control here. Instead, the reporters found that AlJazeera was in rebel hands, at least for now. The town is surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides are armed with tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown against his opponents has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping North Africa and the Middle East. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the rebellion against his 4-decade rule. In the east of the country, opposition forces are welcoming visitors to what they are calling Free Libya. In the city of Benghazi, there are signs of a return to normal. Banks have reopened here and in the town of Al-Baida, both of which threw off Gaddafi's rule about a week ago.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in the city is being filled. Local committees that are running towns and cities in the east of Libya have rallied behind a new leader, the former justice minister who resigned over the brutal repression.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against a dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
Libya relies on its oil fields. They're the mainstay of its economy. But now production appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, only 1/10 of what it would normally produce, according to the manager. The expatriate workers who used to man the plant have fled to escape the violence. Muammar Gaddafi's options are shrinking. Opposition forces continue to advance towards the capital, and the international community has imposed sanctions which further limit his room for maneuver. But the Libyan leader still shows no sign of being in the mood to surrender. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Benghazi.
Pro-Gaddafi rallies are still being held across the country. Just outside the capital, Tripoli, government loyalists took to the streets, waving posters and chanting slogans. There were similar scenes outside AlJazeera too. Well, we've seen some amateur footage, allegedly of Saif al-Islam, that's one of Gaddafi's sons, rallying supporters in Libya. It's unclear when or where these pictures were taken, but in it, Saif al-Islam appears to tell the people that enemy forces are spreading rumours. He also says security forces weren't joining protesters, that weapons would be provided to people ready to fight for Libya. Well, the Canadian and British Prime Ministers have joined calls for Muammar al-Gaddafi to step down. Their comments come as the US Secretary of State prepares for crisis talks in Switzerland. Hillary Clinton is due to meet other foreign ministers in Geneva in the next few hours. John Terrett is at the White House with more on the US reaction.
Nightfall in the United States, and the emphasis on Libya now moves to Europe, where US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is attending a series of meetings on Monday at the United Nations Human Rights Council. Earlier, the Secretary of State had said that the US is reaching out to many Libyans, particularly in the east of the country, as the revolution appears to move west closer to Tripoli. She also revealed to journalists travelling on her plane to Geneva that the US is offering any kind of assistance to Libyans who might wish to consider overthrowing Colonel Gaddafi and his family. This is a ramping up of pressure on the Gaddafi family, and it comes now that the State Department is confident that most Americans who want to leave have left the country. That happened with the docking of the catamaran ferry in the port of Valletta in Malta the back end of last week. Prior to that, they were very nervous about how many Americans were still trapped inside Libya. And that is why we've also heard from two leading senators, John McCain, a Republican, and Joe Lieberman, a hawkish independent, speaking in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, and calling for the immediate imposition of a no-fly zone over Libya, also calling for the White House to recognize the provisional government, which is clearly getting underway in Benghazi. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has also said that the US supports the aspirations and rights of the people of Libya, who she says are sending a very clear message that it's time for Colonel Gaddafi and his family to go.
Well, Tunisia has a new Prime Minister. AlBaji Qaid Sebsi succeeds Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It follows renewed violence in the capital prior to his departure. Nadeem Barber now.
A surprise announcement as Tunisia's interim president names a new Prime Minister.
At this critical moment, in order to maintain our national interest and to ensure that the state is up and running with all its institutions, I requested Mr. Baja Qaid Sebsi to assume the office of Prime Minister, and he thankfully accepted this responsibility.
AlBaji Qaid Sebsi is 84 and a former foreign minister. He served under Tunisia's post-independence leader Habib Bourguiba and under President Zine Al Abidine Ben Ali. His appointment came hours after interim Premier Mohamed Ghannouchi unexpectedly stepped down.
I am not prepared to be the person who takes decisions which result in the loss of life.
The move comes at a tense time for Tunisia. Sunday saw new clashes between protesters and security forces in Tunis. Several people have reportedly been killed on the streets of the capital since Friday. Mohamed Ghannouchi took over as premier on the 14th of January after President Ben Ali fled to Saudi Arabia following weeks of protests. Critics say that since the Jasmine Revolution, there's not been real reform, and Ghannouchi's replacement is unlikely to change that.
He's out of touch, he's out of time, he's belonging other generation. What the Tunisian youth need today, who someone will be able to represent them, who someone will be able to respond to their legitimate demands.
Mohamed Ghannouchi has repeated the government's pledge to hold elections by mid-July. But almost 200 people have been arrested over the weekend. It's not clear how far the new Prime Minister can quell the anger on the streets. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera.
And the crisis in Tunisia has claimed another victim. French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie has resigned after weeks of pressure over her links to the former President Ben Ali. Andrew Potter reports.
A happy holiday in Tunisia for French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie. But the break she took in December and the last weeks of President Ben Ali's rule are unlikely to remain fond memories. Alliot-Marie's been forced to resign for this, the latest in a series of scandals she's been involved in.
Avec le Premier Ministre François Fillon.
With the Prime Minister, François Fillon, we have decided to reorganise the ministries that deal with our diplomacy and our defence. Alain Juppé, a former Prime Minister, a man of experience who has already carried out the job to unanimous acclaim, will be Foreign Minister.
She's not the only French minister to take advantage of questionable free holidays. Prime Minister François Fillon took his family on a New Year's holiday to the Nile resort of Aswan, courtesy of Egypt's soon-to-be deposed President Hosni Mubarak. Alliot-Marie became pressured after it emerged she travelled to Tunisia on a private jet, owned by a businessman with alleged ties to Ben Ali, weeks before he was pushed from power. But with growing turmoil in the Middle East, the timing couldn't have been worse. Both politicians were hammered in the French press, which then took aim at an unpopular president.
It goes back a long time. It's not only Michel Alliomarie. The whole French foreign policy is in disarray, and we can date it to Nicolas Sarkozy's arrival to power.
Alain Juppé becomes foreign minister again after holding the post in the mid-90s under Sarkozy's mentor Jacques Chirac. Sarkozy will be hoping the reshuffle will help stop the scandals which are severely damaging his chances of re-election next year. Andrew Potter, Al Jazeera.
The Jordanian Prime Minister has promised more political reform after the opposition threatened more demonstrations. It comes as supporters of King Abdullah gathered for a show of solidarity in the capital Amman. Protests have been ongoing in the country for weeks. Opposition leaders say the people are getting impatient with the slow pace of reforms in the country. Well, a government hospital says at least 6 people have been killed during anti-government demonstrations in Oman. More than 2,000 protesters gathered in the industrial centre of Sohar on Sunday, demanding political reform. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse them. The protests prompted the Sultan of Oman to introduce around 50,000 new jobs in a bid to quell the unrest. Well, to Bahrain now, where the US President Barack Obama has welcomed government moves to reshuffle its cabinet to appease demonstrators. Thousands of people marched through the capital of Bahrain against the monarchy on Sunday for a third week. Protesters have rejected the king's appeal for dialogue and are calling for him to step down. Opposition parties in Yemen say they plan to join the anti-government protesters in a bid to pressure the president to step down. This comes after President Ali Abdullah Saleh met up with his army generals as he tries to shore up his grip on power. Hashim Ahlabara reports from the capital.
Remaining defiant, President Saleh telling his army officers that Yemen is in danger of disintegration and that they should fight for its unity.
We have vowed to defend the republican system, the unity and safety of the republic till the last drop of our blood, and this vow stands now. There is an attempt to split the country into north and south.
The president was referring to his arch rivals, secessionists asking the south to break away from the north, and the Houthi rebels in their ongoing battle against the government for greater autonomy in their region.
This isn't the first time that the president has met his army generals since the start of the crisis in the country. But his statements tell a great deal about his confusion, and it's clear that he has been inspired by Gaddafi's speeches.
But thousands of young Yemenis who have taken to the streets across the country have totally different demands. The departure of the regime. Demands waved off by Saleh's ruling party as illegitimate.
It won't be an Egyptian-style change. It won't be a Tunisian type of change. But unfortunately, if it goes to become very close to what's happening now in Libya, then I don't by any means rule out the possibility of an international and regional intervention here.
For these protesters, the movement has come a long way, inspired many Yemenis, and made sacrifices that calls for dialogue by the government are too late. But if the president is determined to cling to power, the opposition and the anti-government protesters say they will muster more men here in the capital and across the country to put an end to what they describe as an autocratic regime. Hashim Ahlabara, Al Jazeera, Sana'a.
Well, as anti-government forces in Libya gain ground, Muammar Gaddafi is running out of options. We'll take a look at how the country is now divided between pro- and anti-Gaddafi factions. And Hollywood's A-list gathers in Los Angeles for the 83rd Academy Awards. So who's going home with the Oscar? We'll tell you in a few moments.
Business Latest is brought to you by Capco in just about everything.